So what I want to get to is one of the core conflicts at the heart of the movie, and that is this direct link to society, which is the Boravians and the Jarapurians. Okay, and I think this is really interesting because as soon as I saw it, as soon as I saw where the countries were and the names, and then as soon as I started seeing more and more, I was like, oh my God, how is James Gunn doing this? How is he not even it's not allegory where Superman is an allegory of Christ, for example. That's an allegory. But when you're directly like it's so obvious it's not allegory when you are referencing the Israel and Palestinian genocide. So you have the Baravians, which are meant to sort of represent a little bit of a mix of Israel, but also there's a little bit of Russia in there because they do sound Russian and they do have architecture that implies Russian. But you also have the guy with the deep voice like this who sounds like Benjamin Netanyahu, and he has like the gray, like wiry, psychopathic, mad scientist hair. And the leader of Boravia, is very much like Benjamin Netanyahu mixed with Putin. And the commentary is directly linked to the Palestinian genocide. And it could easily be also interpreted as Russia invading and occupying the Ukraine. But I think when you get further in the movie and you see people dressed, in more desert clothing attire, you see, oh my God, these are Arabs. These are, the Jarampurians are essentially Palestinians. And the more we're going to get further into our discussion here on that, but one of the big obvious scenes that solidifies that is that you have full-on military, like battle-dressed soldiers and tanks that are rolling up to this fenced-in city like Gaza, and they're literally pointing their guns through the fence at civilians, men, women, and children who are also hoisting a handmade Superman flag, calling for Superman to come and save them. So they're not terrorists. And that's a direct reflection of what's happening in Gaza, is that people are being innocently killed. And you can find more information on this, Aaron Shack Politics, on my YouTube channel, Aaron Shack Politics. We cover a lot of Gaza and Palestine, the West Bank, what's going on there. But it is a direct reflection of what the Israeli occupation forces do and how they directly target hospitals, mosques, churches, even Christian churches have been bombed, hospitals, and they've dropped 2,000-pound bunker busters directly from America on these buildings, on hospitals, and it completely turns it into a crater. So there's no justification for that. There's no reason to harm innocent children either. And I've seen a lot of images of children with no limbs, and I've seen people's entire family trees, chunks of their family tree, or the entire family completely demolished in these bombings and these killings. And the reason why I point out the fencing is because recently, one of the things in the news is that they will funnel Palestinians into this fenced-in area in order to give them aid. And it's very reminiscent of concentration camps from Nazi Germany. And so they funnel them in these lines, and they're fenced in, and they have guards, and the guards shoot them as they get the aid. And they shoot them to also, control them and say, like, you need to leave, so we're just going to start killing you guys until you flee with whatever aid you manage to get. And it's kind of dog eat dog, right? And so that is deeply reminiscent of the scenes that we're seeing in this movie. So this movie isn't meant to be like propaganda or anything. It's meant to wake you up to the idea that we've had this genocide going on for 2 years, since 2023, October 7th. And granted, it's been happening before then. But this is the first time that it's been literally live streamed to your televisions, your phones, your TikTok, your YouTube, your Facebook, all that stuff, every single day. And our politicians are paid to send money over there. Our tax dollars are going over there. The city of San Marcos even discovered through their city council that some of their millions of dollars was going to Israel instead of to their city. And they were called anti-Semitic by Governor Abbott for saying like, hey, we should worry about us first before we send money to a foreign country that's committing an act of genocide, and now we're complicit. So this movie wakes you up to that idea, and it can't be denied. It can't say, oh well, it's just making a statement, or oh, it's just a fictional universe with fictional characters. No, media, whether it's Andor and the massacre that happens in Andor, which I want to make a video on as well, because that's a direct reflection of how Imperial forces are the IDF, or the IOF, Israeli Occupation Forces, and how the people, not just the rebels, but also the people that are in that courtyard in season 2 of Andor are essentially the Palestinians just being massacred for living in their own land. And it's about resources. Okay, so moving on. This gets to a bigger point in the film, which is tying together all of our ideas, right? Superman intervenes in world conflicts, as he does in the comics, to do the right thing, not always the American way, because the American way is to send those bombs and support the Boravian government because they want the oil that the Jarhanporians are sitting on, or any other metals or any sort of resources that they're sitting on, in the same way that we use Israel as quote-unquote the only democracy in the Middle East, even though it's more of an authoritarian ethno-state. And an ethno-state is where you decide that only one people run religion, whether it's white, Jewish, Zionists, are allowed to live in that area, and anyone else, Christians, Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims, etc., no one else is allowed to live there. And, you know, by doing so, you cause an ethnic cleansing, a genocide. You murder people, you push them out to the sea, you force them to leave, and you wall them off in a city where even if they wanted to leave, they can't leave, and the only thing that faces them is outright extinction. So, I mean, that is why this movie is so freaking important, and why I love it even more than I thought I could imagine that I would enjoy this movie. So I was trying to come in as unbiased as I could, because I was like, man, I really liked what they were doing with Henry Cavill, and Zack Snyder's Justice League really opened up some possibilities that I'd like to see in the future. But at the same time, I think this is a great first step for Superman, and I can't wait to see what he ends up doing next. So he doesn't always align with the American way, and a large part of the movie is the government and news sources and Lex Luthor taking advantage of the situation of everyone questioning, like, well, should we have this guy who's from America, but he says he doesn't represent America, but he goes against our interests in the Middle East, essentially? So, and he brings it up to Lois in the interview. He says, I went there because it was the right thing to do. Like, should those kids have died? Did those people deserve to die at the hands of the Boravians? You know? And that's the question we face every day in America. Do those Palestinians deserve to die just based on where they live, or what they think, or what they believe? Just because we want to establish a foothold for Jewish pedophiles to shelter themselves in Israel? I have a video on that on my politics channel as well, where, much like the Roman Catholic Church shelters their priests who are pedophiles against little children, and they move them to other churches or move them around the world, what happens in Jewish synagogues in the United States, other countries, these guys can be pedophiles, and then when they're about to be caught, Israel will shelter them, and the police, the IDF, none of these forces will prosecute them. They'll just, they just vanish. And there's no accountability, because the United States isn't going to do anything. Israel's not going to do anything about it. So they're protecting pedophiles. An evil country full of evil people. So Lois questions him and his choices, as any good journalist should. And that leads, that leads to conflict. And that really shows that, while Superman has this good heart, he hasn't thought of, like, the bigger implications that Lois is sort of opening his mind to, is like, well, how are you going to be this world police? Who decides what's right and wrong, And granted, he has a good moral compass of what's right and wrong, as Superman always has, But, you know, at some point push comes to shove and the American government doesn't agree with what he's doing. What happens then? Well, it's the events of this movie.